Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. When Swami Vivekananda addressed the very first parliament in this city in 1893 and began with Sisters and Brothers of America, he evoked a massive applause. The same kind of applause that Beethoven evoked when he conducted his Ninth Symphony. If you remember, the fourth movement of the Ninth Symphony contains Schiller's Ode to Joy, which says pretty much the same thing. All men are brothers. Beethoven, of course, was stone deaf and had to be turned around so that he could see the applause by a young singer called Nariman. The Swami then went on to speak about his religion being the mother of religions and his belonging to an old ancient order of monks. And then went on to say that his religion honestly believed not only in tolerating other faiths, but that all other faiths were actually equal in the eyes of his faith. He then went on to speak about your people. And he said that after the temple was destroyed in 70 AD by the Roman general Titus, Jews kept wafting up on the Kerala coast and have lived there ever since in peace and harmony. As a matter of fact, I was informed that in an urn contained in Israel, there is the soil of Kerala. The reason being that this is the only place on earth on which the Jews have actually been tolerated for 2,000 years. The typical conception of a Jew in the 16th century in Europe was Shylock in The Merchant of Venice. And Shakespeare put into the words of Shylock the following, where Shylock describes the discrimination against his people and then rails against it by saying, doesn't a Jew have eyes and hands like any other human being? If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? And if you wrong us, shall we not revenge? The Swami then went on to speak about our people, the Zoroastrians, and how they had also been given succor in this land for 1300 years. And then went on to speak about how all world religions ultimately are streams which come from different sources but go into the same ocean. And then finally he wound up by saying that the greatest enemy of world peace is fanaticism. And the bell which tolled that morning at the parliament is the death knell of fanaticism. How wrong the Swami was. Fanaticism is at its peak in this world today. The Greco-Roman tradition spoke about the great philosopher king. Plato spoke about the philosopher king. And Rome actually had the Pax Romana, or the Peace of Rome, from the period 98 to 180 AD, where they had these great emperors. Now each one of the emperors, Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and then finally Marcus Aurelius, all kept the Pax Romana by the sword. In the East, however, we had a very different scenario. We had three great emperors, two who belonged to India and one who belonged to Persia, who actually lived what the Swami said. The Emperor Ashoka, who lived 2250 years ago, came to the throne by killing his brothers and had a massive war in Kalinga, which is modern-day Orissa, where millions of lives were shed. And suddenly, seeing all this bloodshed, he completely reformed himself and became a Buddhist. Now, he left for us many rock edicts which survive till today. And the rock edict, which is the 12th rock edict, is very important from the point of view of today's discussion. Because that rock edict says that any of my subjects who extols another person's faith is actually praising his own faith and doing it a favor by doing so, and also doing the other faith a favor. But if he does the opposite, he denigrates first his own faith and the other person's. So therefore, ultimately, let us live with concord, use the word concord, which I would translate loosely as being fraternity today. And he then went on to say, let all my subjects be well informed so that each may live by each other's principles. Very far cry from what is happening in the world today. After Emperor Ashoka, you have the great Sasanian Emperor Kushru I, who lived in the 6th century. And he also actually lived by these principles. One of his most famous sayings was that give me anything that sounds right from any religious faith, and I will follow it. But even if from my own faith I find something is patently wrong or opposed to reason, I will not follow it. Then of course you have the great Emperor Akbar, Mughal Emperor, who had the first parliament of world religions. He set this up in his capital in Fatehpur Sikri in the year 1575, and he called it the Ibadat Khana, or the house of worship. He attracted religious faiths from all over the world. He had Jews, he had Christians, he had Sabians, he even had Charvaks, who are the materialist school of Hindus who believe that everything is here and now. And it is this great emperor who actually lived the concept of fraternity. In fact, he went out of his way to form one world faith, something like the Baha'is believe ought to happen, the Deen-e-Ilahi. But unfortunately it died out with his death, because it didn't have any body to it in that sense. There was no priesthood, there was no ritual, etc. But he lived and practiced fraternity. So, if you ask me, what is the way forward today? I have just signed a declaration of global ethics. Maybe another declaration would be a first step to world peace in this sense, that you have religious leaders who come from all faiths, who will now sign a declaration, a solemn declaration, which contains at least two principles. One, of non-violence when it comes to attaining a certain end, whatever be the means. But the means cannot be violent in any circumstance, first. And second, to accept the fact that each world religion teaches, as you sow, so shall you reap. If these two basic things are signed and put into effect, we will at least start towards the goal that has been set, the utopian goal that has been set by the three great Eastern emperors. And if I may end with Robert Frost's great poem, the woods are lovely, dark and deep. Today they are no longer lovely. They are only dark and they are deep. So the woods are dark and deep. But I have promises to keep. What are those promises? The promise to be free from prejudice. Freedom is the freedom from prejudice. So I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Thank you all very much.
The Global Ethic was signed in 1993 by the individuals who convened the Second Parliament of World Religions. And I think we should all be honored because Rohinton was one of the signers of that global ethic in 1993. who sought to find that it is so important for all of us, because we come from different places. We have different cultures. We don't speak the same language. So how in the world can we have one religion? So the Parliament of World Religions has convened here, and maybe it'll be convening in another 4 or 5 years. But I'm so glad and honored that all of you are here with us today. And if you get a chance, and if it's important to you, read that global ethic, because it does show us that there is a way for us to be able to know one another and respect one another. And please, please learn your history. We have, Zenobia had mentioned that we have the United States Constitution. But I can share with you that the Haudenosaunee, the 5 tribes, the indigenous people that were here before the Europeans came, this is where they got the principles of the Constitution for the United States. And if you talk to any of the indigenous people here that are present, they'll share it with you. So know your history, know where you came from, know who you are. And on a personal note, I thought I was 100% Japanese, but I'm not. I found out that I'm Korean, Chinese, Japanese, Mongolian, Hungarian, and Sami. And all I can say is Genghis Khan went from the Pacific all the way to Europe, and he left a little bit along the way. So we're all together, and we're humanity. So please get to know each other while you're here. And thank you so much.
If you want to read the Global Ethics document, it's on the website of the Parliament. I wanted to say thank you to Justice Nariman for such beautiful words of wisdom and reminding us that instead of living in our own cocoons and shells, if we can just come out of our comfort zone and look at one another, all human beings, as one fraternity and one big human family, the world will be so much more happier, peaceful, and filled with justice for everyone. I'm going to open up the floor to the audience. So if anyone has a question, please raise your hand and we'll bring the mic to you. For any 4 of our speakers here. Okay. Do you want to come up here? Because I don't think this wire is long enough to bring it to you. Oh, I didn't know there was another mic there.
Thank you. I'm interested in your, the Jewish representative, I forgot your name, but I'm interested in your thoughts related to the golden rule as compared to the platinum rule. You referenced the Charter for Compassion and this idea of doing for others as you should have them do unto you, but what about doing unto others as they would have you do unto them?
Well, you've taught me something. I've never heard that referred to as the platinum rule. But I think the way I would respond to that is, and maybe others have, is, I think there's several different ways. There are more than several. There are many ways for us to express what. The Eastern religions don't refer to it as the golden rule. That's a Western idea, but they very much have the same concept embedded in the cores of their religious teaching. We've heard that today, and so I guess what I'm trying to say here is that I don't know that we need to. I'm worried about getting caught up in semantics, because to me, what you refer to as the platinum rule, in my mind, is not so different from the golden rule. And the important thing is what we're trying to communicate, which is whether you say it as the platinum rule, the golden rule, or in any of the Eastern religions, or however, is that, is to be caring and to treat other human beings with the respect and the dignity that we are taught. And that's the most important thing. And again, I'll draw on this very prominent theme in Judaism. This is very prominent, and that is, the rabbis say in Hebrew, Zelo ha-midrash, ela ha-ma'aseh. It's not what you say, it's what you do. And I would apply that to your question, meaning we all would have different ways of expressing this keen idea, but let's do it. That's where really the rubber hits the road.
Thank you, Terry. Yeah, in all religions, we believe in good thoughts, good words, and good deeds, good actions. The good actions is what we all are pursuing and spreading. So, any other audience member that has a question for one of our speakers? That includes Justice Nariman. Kushi?
I don't know if I'm understanding correctly what you were trying to get at, but I wonder if it has something to do with, and certainly I wouldn't connect the golden rule to imperialism, but there are ways in which we do for others what makes sense for us, without always, in our history, having listened to what those people need, and that's our way of showing. I agree with you, it's about compassion. Compassion's bottom line. But one kind of compassion says, look, this is what you should do, and here you go. And another kind of compassion says, what is it that would be best for you, and I will listen to your needs and respond accordingly. I don't know, is that what you're trying to get at?
Thank you for that.
There's a mic. I'm sure you can get a little bit away from the camera. Just take the mic on the side.
Fine. In general, it's for all the panelists.
Step up a little.
Just go to the mic, that's all.
In general, for all the panelists, this question, two questions. One is there any living creature or person or anything that you think exemplifies complete freedom? So for example, some people would say a butterfly because it can fly wherever it wants. So I'm not necessarily saying a human being, but it could be a human being. So if you have one name, one answer, one word, one creature that you can describe as completely free. And number two, in each of your faiths, religions, backgrounds, is there a particular age at which you believe the child is, the infant has become the child, is growing to become a teen, is actually understanding the choice of free will? For example, I do know in Zoroastrianism, the thread ceremony, the navjot, is done at an age where you can make such a decision of what is right or wrong or good or bad. And so just two questions on whatever your answer is.
Well, when you have the big boss, why should I answer?
The answer to the first question is that I cannot conceive of any creature which is absolutely free, because we don't live in an absolute world. We live in a relative world. I think that answers the first question. And the second question, Zoroastrians are supposed to have their navjots at the age of 15, incidentally. And 15 is the age of majority in Iran. So it is when you cross puberty and you are completely able to grasp the fundamental principles of Zoroastrianism, that at that point you exercise your freedom of choice. And one of the most important Gathic verses, therefore, is Yasna 30.2, which speaks of God having created two spirits. Now, two spirits are only two minds like us. and each mind without a body was given choice. And one was the wise one who chose to do good, the other was the one not so wise who chose evil. Now why do I say that the one who chose good was wise and the other not so wise? Because ultimately, through a very tortuous route, even Angra, mind you, lands up at the same place. So you might as well do it because good is good for its own sake. Any other responses?
Well, I definitely agree with the answer to the first question. You know, again, to talk in metaphors, if you go to the story of creation, right, before there was order, there was chaos. And there is such a thing, and the justice probably can speak to it more knowledgeably than can I, and that is advocating a form of government called anarchy. And there, to the best of my knowledge, we have not established any kind of group of people or civilization that is based on anarchy. And therefore, what we heard here is there are rules. Or as the justice put it so wisely, we live in a relative world. And then to answer the second question, I tried to say as briefly as I could. I was trying to live within the guidelines, and that is that in Judaism, study and doing, study leads to doing. The more wisdom you gain, the more you study. Now, for me as a liberal Jew, I just want to say this because it's important to me. As a liberal Jew, Torah for me goes beyond the scroll. Torah for me is all knowledge. So people who study and become educated, according to my spiritual tradition, become wiser and therefore will do more to make the world a better place. And that there's always a question, just like we heard, at what age are you responsible for all this doing and all these rules? When does that happen? And it developed in Judaism over a long time, and all of you know this, probably, or most of you know this, that there has to be a demarcation point. When, for example, are you responsible for the rituals? When must you fast on the Day of Atonement? Can a 6-year-old fast? Should a 6-year-old fast? Or should a 90-year-old ill person fast? These are. And the answer in general has come up that for the age of 13, a male at that point forward then becomes responsible. So you all know about the bar mitzvah ceremony, very famous in America. That's a moment at which the demarcation is met. That's why people, today you are a man. Today you are a woman. That means, at this point on, you have adult responsibility spiritually.
Actually, I thought I would leave it to
Zenobia,
them.
could you
Yeah,
limit
sorry.
your response to a minute?
Oh, okay. There goes my freedom. That's okay. I will benevolently live with it. But anyways, quick response. I just feel the first one, I agree, because not only is it relative, but I feel as long as we have a thinking mind, we create our own jails. So I think that is so subjective. Like, how can we really be free? And again, like Justice Nariman also said, Spenta manu, Ira manu, the good wolf, the bad wolf, and ultimately it's all relative. So it goes back to our ashta, our truth. If you're living in absolute truth, it shouldn't be an issue. But there's always issues. And then as far as the second part goes, it's interesting because my son is 10 and a half and my daughter's 10, and we've been talking about doing the namjol. And my daughter, from the time immemorial, she really takes the religion choice thing very seriously. She has to have her choice. She's a true American and a Zarathushtri, and she has been questioning why namjol needs to be done. And So I feel like it shouldn't just be age, but it should also be the relevance that goes with things. Because, we talked about 15 years, 13 years, but we have had leaders who could be in their 70s and 80s and are still not wise. So I mean, again, age is very irrelevant. It's a relative thing. So I think it again goes back to Asha. It just goes back to, just really living your truth. And like I tell my children, be N, be K. Be nice, be kind. If you follow that, you're good. Did I stay under a minute? Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. I do want to give you guys an opportunity for closing comments.
One small postscript.
She won't curtail you. Your time.
Not that I intend to abuse her in any way. But the only comment that I would offer is there are very few children who are Mozart at the age of 7.
There you go. See? What was it? There are very few children that are Mozart at the age of 7. In our most of the Navjot ceremonies, like the bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah is done at 7. And my daughter refused. She's like, till I don't understand what I'm getting into, I'm not doing it.
So,
Pray for
Asayo,
me. Pray for me.
my panelists, Asayo, Gary, and Zenobia, thank you so much for working with me over the last so many months to bring this program to the Parliament. And thank you, Justice Nariman, within just a moment's notice to agree to come and speak in this program for a few minutes. But before you all go and we begin the second program, I do want you all to take just a moment, 1 minute each, and give your closing thoughts to our audience. And what do you want to send our audience home with? Give them a message that will stay in their minds and inspire them to be more involved and even more engaged. Not just engage themselves, but engage the community in increasing peace in our world and enabling everyone to live and breathe with freedom. And let's start with Asayo.
You started with me. Do you want to go next? I'm supposed to be on duty. Thank you so much for coming and listening to the wisdom of my colleagues and for understanding because I didn't have my notes. Thank goodness for everything. Thank goodness for your kind attention. And always be aware that freedom is your choice. We have to have rules and regulations, and our traditions teach us these. But it's your choice. And we have to learn to be able to live with one another and know that we are not alone and we can't exist alone. We have to care for one another and help one another and respect our differences. Because one kind can be a little boring. And I've been at the Parliament, not quite every session, but I've had the pleasure of meeting so many wonderful people, and they've shared their culture, their language, and their spirituality with me. And we all have to learn, and I'm still learning. So please share and enjoy the Parliament, because people have worked very hard. And Tara, thank you so much for your understanding and for coordinating this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Asayo. It's been a pleasure getting to know you and working with you. Gary, would you like to go next?
Yes, well, I want to say I think this must be a historic moment because I think it's the first time in all of the Parliament's history, going to 1893, that there are 2 Dr. Z's on the panel. And I think that's very important.
Mazel tov.
Thank you so much. Right, and I want to address myself right now in closing to comments that Dr. Z actually made. My field of real expertise, friends, is the history of Jewish life in America. So permit me in parting to introduce you to a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to a Jewish physician from Savannah, Georgia in the year 1820. He wrote to Dr. Jacob de la Mata. De la Mata had delivered the keynote address for the consecration of the first synagogue building in Savannah that was erected. And he was so proud of his community's achievements that De la Mata wrote and sent a printed copy of his dedicatory address to the 80-year-old former president in the hope that Jefferson would read it and respond positively to the doctor's oratorical disquisition on the historic consecration of the synagogue in Savannah. Jefferson's letter to Dr. de la Mata is very short, but it is truly remarkable. Jefferson began by informing Dr. de la Mata that de la Mata's keynote address had given the former president, and I quote, the gratifying reflection that his country has been the first to prove to the world two truths that were most salutary to human society. The first of these two truths was that America proved that people could govern themselves. Now listen, friends, carefully to the second truth that the erection of the synagogue building in Savannah, Georgia proved. The second truth, Jefferson wrote, was, quote, that religious freedom is the most effectual anodyne against religious dissension. The maxim of civil government, Thomas Jefferson wrote, being reversed in that of religion, where its true form is divided we stand, united we fall. Jefferson identified a profound lesson that religious history of the American nation manifests. Divided we stand religiously, united we fall. So let each of us delve deeply into our own faiths and live lives that are true to those faiths, lives that serve as proof texts for the assertion that compassion lies at the heart of all religions, ethical and spiritual traditions. If we do this, we will experience an American symphony of faiths that will unquestionably bring freedom and peace to the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
One sentence. Lead kindly light amidst the encircling gloom. And one small postscript to what this great gentleman has just told us. No wonder that when Kennedy had the most brilliant people at the White House, he said, this is the most intelligent ever group of people that has been in the White House, and paused. And then said, ever since Thomas Jefferson dined here alone.
Thank you. Well, to build up on what these two luminaries said, it's the same thing, right? Thomas Jefferson knew what he was talking about because he read the Cyropedia. I'm not promoting things, but I also feel the most important thing is to go back to the quote I had mentioned earlier, which I try to live my life, and it's even in my email because I'm a quoteaholic. What Zarathustra taught and lived, what Dr. Wayne Dyer said. How people treat you is their karma, how you react to them is yours. So you always have that choice. If somebody bullies you and you bully them back, you are giving them the power to change you. Don't do that. I'm not saying accept bullying, but you do have the power to be good. Be nice, be kind. And I will end with Hamazor Hama Ashobet, which means may we be united in strength and righteousness. Thank you.
That's right.
Justice Nariman, you want to give your closing thoughts?
I thought I had just given
Is there a partiality going on here? No, just pointing out. Sorry.
There's a raised hand.
I just want to recognize that we have in our audience our priest
founding priest of our Council of Religious Leaders amongst us, and he was also one of the signers of the Global Ethics.
Can you stand up and tell everyone? He's Eric Kovacs, and you're from Toronto, Canada, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's phenomenal that in this room with just a few of us, there are 2 signers of the Global Ethics document. And it's really a beautiful document. If you haven't read it yet, it is always going to be on the Power website. Would you like to end with a moment of closing thoughts, Justice Nariman?
If you insist. I can only say that I'm so happy that my predecessor will always be called Rohinton the first. I will be Rohinton the second.
Thank you for the opportunity.
So thank you so much, all the speakers, my esteemed speakers who have now become my friends. Thank you, Justice Nariman.
Thank you.
Thank you, audience, for being such an engaged audience. Thank you so much.